The conference finals have delivered in a big way. What can the Leafs glean about what we're seeing from the Final Four teams? We'll dig into that, Coffeegate, and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centered podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. What's going on, Dave? How you feeling today on a Tuesday?
Oh man, it was a rainy one in Toronto today.
Yeah, were you out there driving around or what?
No, I was I was trying to fix a gutter that was leaking. So that was fun.
Oh, okay. Chores outdoors in the rain. Not fun at all. Not fun at all.
No.
You know who else I'm sure isn't having fun? I'm sure Craig Berube is not having fun. Really getting his first taste of how much the Maple Leafs fan base is rabid when it comes to taking content and running away with it, because Coffeegate is now a thing. Coffeegate, Dave, where Mitch Marner and Craig Berube went and were spotted chatting in an Etobicoke cafe over the weekend. And now all sorts of conspiracy theories are running wild within Leafs Nation. You got to love it, buddy. You got to love it.
You know what the funny thing is? My first thought wasn't even the fact that the two are meeting. My first thought was, oh, I know that place. It's down the road from me.
Where's that at?
It's called a place called Bevo. It used to be called Zaza, and then it's a very nice spot. Italian cafe. They got gelato there. They got some pastries. Well, pastries. But it's a nice spot actually. They did some nice work there. But I recognized it in an instant. I'm like, oh, that's kind of not good that I can recognize that place so easily. But yeah, I'm just like, oh, this is interesting. I understand it's you can't read too much into one conversation, but it's obviously who was meeting. It's just like, oh, you can't hide in this city, man.
And look, let's be honest, we have a podcast, so we need to talk about this stuff, so we're gonna throw our tinfoil hats on for just a second. I will say that it's not that weird like Mitch Marner and Craig Berube. I mean, Craig Berube just took the job. He spoke to a lot of the players, over the phone when he first took the job. And now that he's in the city, the players who are here for the summer, I'm sure he's trying to hammer out some time to chat with them. I'm sure he has not written off Mitch Marner from his team. He doesn't necessarily mean or guarantee that he's still going to be in a Maple Leaf, come September, October when the season starts. But as of now, Berube, when he's putting together his plan, unless something changes, Marner's going to be a big part of what he's going to want to do. So, he had to figure out what's his deal. And I mean, look, I think too, Craig Berube, if you sit down and you have this conversation, I think it would be beneficial for him to kind of ask him all right, why doesn't it work in the playoffs? What happens? Why do you think you've struggled come playoff time? And what do you think I can do to try and help you through those issues? Those are constructive conversations. And I'm sure that is what was had, during that sit down. So, lots of people try to put two and two together, but I think this is only a positive, realistically, regardless of what was talked about. I don't see this as anything negative, even if it means that the Maple Leafs are surely going to go and keep Mitch Marner. I still think seeing good communication from Marner and the coach and the new coach is still net positive, in my opinion.
Oh, I do. This is the time right now where Craig Berube is coming into this, and he's as he said in his press conferences, that stuff is in the past. Let's see what I can do to move these guys forward. And he's gauging what Mitch Marner's mindset is, right? He's trying to get inside his head and see like, okay, like what's his deal here? Can I get kind of an idea of how Marner is? Obviously, he can watch whatever he watches on the ice, but just even to get to know him. And like we've heard this before. Like, remember when Mike Babcock went on that like emergency run to Arizona after the playoffs because there was a reported rift between him and Austin Matthews? Like,
yeah.
This is not a situation that should be seen as like very not normal, because it is very normal for and again, it all happens to be that Mitch Marner lives in Toronto. Like, he's here all summer. He's not like some of the other guys who go back to where they are for the summer, right? So it kind of also works out that way too. I do know Mitch lives not far from that coffee shop. I'm not going to divulge the exact location because I do not want to be the reason why
Mitch. We don't need to dox Mitch Marner here. We don't need to be doxing Mitch Marner.
No, but I do think that it is an important, like, this. I know that a lot of talk about trading Mitch Marner, but that is a very, like, a lot of people, analysts, former hockey execs are saying, you trade a Marner, like, you got to be very weary of what that trade looks like and how it impacts your team, right, going forward, right? Brad Treliving's been in this situation a few times, you know. Matthew Tkachuk told Brad Treliving, I'm not staying in Calgary, so find yourself a way to get something for me now. It's a little bit of a different situation, but it's also one where he can't come out on this trade looking like how he did with the Calgary one with Tkachuk.
Do you think there's a possibility that the Maple Leafs just want to get a look, at least, like at the very least, get a look at what Marner, looks like, for lack of a better word, in Craig Berube's system, under the tutelage of a new voice, of a new coach? Like, because there's a lot that Mitch Marner does that you like, that you think actually will fit in with Craig Berube, specifically defensively, where he's very responsible. He's willing to block shots. He kills penalties for you. He's forces turnovers in his own end. Like, Marner is responsible defensively. We know this to be the case, and we know that Berube wants his forwards to play defense. Like, he believes in a full 5-man unit on the back end. So, like, I look at it and I'm thinking Berube probably looks at Mitch Marner and says, this is a really good player. Like, if I could somehow unlock regular season Mitch Marner in the playoffs and like have it transfer over, we've got a really good player here, and it'll be difficult to find another one. You know what I mean? Like, Mitch Marner is a top 20 player when he's at his best, when he's in there and during the regular season, and it just kind of fades. So I think that is kind of a precarious situation that the Maple Leafs find themselves in Mitch Marner, because, again, on one hand, super talented, does a lot of really good things. He's not like an all gas, no breaks type of guy. He does play responsibly in his own end to accompany the wizardry that he can do from time to time offensively, unlike some offensive superstars. So it does kind of make you wonder if Berube, wants the challenge of, hey, I think I could get the best out of this guy, kind of in a way that Barry Trotz did with Alex Ovechkin, years ago. And that's how Ovi ended up winning his cup. He finally bought in to play defensively, finally played the way that he needed to win a Stanley Cup. And it happened. Now, again, it's not defense that Marner's is the issue. Like, his issue is, I don't even know, like, just timidness in the playoffs, his unwillingness to take it to the center of the net, to open up space for himself, whatever it is. But if Berube could unlock that, boy, the Leafs would be very happy for that to occur. But that would require, obviously, keeping Marner.
I think right now for Craig Berube, he's got to see, can he kind of unlock, as you said, unlock more out of Marner. And I guess this is what these conversations are about, right? What's
Exactly.
Mitch's plan? What's he going to do to get himself, better prepared for that next level? So I think that's really what these conversations are like. And if Craig doesn't like what he hears, Craig's going to tell somebody.
Oh, 100%. Like, even through just conversation, I'm sure Craig is learning a lot just from talking to the guy and seeing, almost like a pre-draft interview in a way where you're gleaning information based on how they're receiving the questions, based on how they're answering them. Is there accountability in their answers? Is there, like, that's the type of stuff I'm sure Berube is also gleaning while having these discussions. And ultimately he'll go to tree living and after talking with Marner could say, we had a really good chat. I think that we're on the same page. We're going to try some of this stuff. And I think we could get, Mitch Marner to really open up and be the player that he can be come playoff time. Or perhaps things went south at that coffee meeting. And, in the back of his mind, not that things went south and they got into an argument, but in the back of his mind, based on Mitch's answers, maybe Berube goes back and says, yeah, I don't think he's got it. I don't know if it's gonna if he's going to get it, and I don't know if he's gonna get it here. He may need a change of scenery, and maybe Berube will come to that conclusion after that meeting, or came to that conclusion after that meeting, and perhaps many more that might come about throughout the summer. But like we said, we don't know what was said during the sit down coffee gate. Lots of conspiracy theories going around, but uh, at the end of the day, it's not that weird that it happened. I think I had heard that John Tavares got a phone call from Berube, and when he returns from Europe, also planning on doing a sit down. I don't know if it's at the same coffee shop or what, but at some point they'll be getting together, him and the captain, to talk about the future. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. What's up?
There'll be probably a different spot. That place is already bugged.
Yeah, that's
it's true. An Italian spot. You already know that place is bugged. Come on.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Probably go to a Portuguese bakery perhaps next time for John Tavares. There you go. There you go. Get yourself one of those Portuguese tarts. Those are delicious. Portuguese tart or cannoli, Dave?
No, I'm a cannoli guy.
Absolutely. The fact that it took you a second to even think about it.
Well, you were a little delayed there.
Okay.
And I was also picturing a cannoli in my brain too when you said that.
All right, let's take a break. Let's take a break. Let's come back and let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the Stanley Cup Final. Game 3 in the Western Final just went down last night. What can we glean? What can the Maple Leafs learn from watching these playoffs and apply that to their team building and the way that they play next season? We'll break those down on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time makes getting NHL tickets even faster and easier. Price on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to puck drop. With killer last-minute deals, all in prices, views from receipt, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets. Take the guesswork. They've got flash deals. They've got zone deals. The all-in pricing and the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you, as we are every single Monday through Friday. You can find the podcast on YouTube and also wherever you download your audio podcast from as well. And get yourself some daily Maple Leafs dosage of content all the way through the off season, through the playoffs, through the off season. We are 365 here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. 52 weeks a year, I guess we'll say. More so than 365. We're not every day, but we are every week, all the way through the year. even when the Leafs aren't playing games, and they haven't for quite some time, but there still are 4 teams remaining in the Stanley Cup playoffs, Dave. And dude, these have been fantastic games. Like each and every one of them have been so fun to watch. I knew they were going to be. To me, the 4 teams remaining: Edmonton, Dallas, New York, and Florida, 4 of the top 5, 6 teams in the NHL. You just knew that they're going to be great games, and they really haven't disappointed. The Dallas Stars last night coming back from a 2-0 deficit to beat the Edmonton Oilers 5-3. Jason Robertson, brother of Nick Robertson, his first career playoff hat trick. He really broke out in this playoffs, in this series, and certainly in this game to give the Dallas Stars a 2-1 series lead. Did you have any thoughts on last night's game before we kind of break things down on a general level?
I just loved how my group text chains are like, "Oh, Stars are in trouble because it was 2-0." Then about and not even an hour later, Oilers stuck. like just how kind of the conversation just flipped. Like
Dallas scored three goals so quick, just bang, bang, bang. It was like
3 minutes and 43 or 3 minutes and 33 seconds. Like, whoo.
Yeah.
That was just the reason why we like Dallas so much is because you look up and down that lineup and they can beat you in so many different ways. Like Jason Robertson, it's easy sometimes to forget about Jason Robertson when you have guys like Wyatt Johnson, Stankoven kind of getting a lot of talk through how through the Stars run. And this guy just puts up a hat trick. Like Rupe Hintz coming back. Like I think people forget how important Rupe Hintz is to that team, right? And they didn't have him for the first 2 games of the series. Like if this is what the Rupe Hintz are gonna get, this is gonna be a problem for the Oilers because the Stars right now, you thought maybe you had them in a tough spot. They come back, and I think the Oilers will definitely make this a series. Like these are still close games, but
like that's 5-3 with an empty netter. Like that was a 4-3 game or 3-3 game most of the way, and then J. Rob scores the Hattie with a few minutes left in the third period, and they get the empty netter 5-3 final. So yeah, they're totally close games, and Edmonton's got every chance in the world to tie things up in game form. And I know Connor McDavid, who probably had his best game of the series and his best game in quite a while. In the first period, that guy was a man possessed. He had like 4 shots in the first period, 2 points. He was so good tonight. But regardless, I think you look at this Dallas team and you noted it. They're just built right. They're built right and they play right. And that kind of leads us to what we want to talk about today. And that was whether or not is what can the Leafs learn about the teams that are still competing in the playoffs? Like what can the Leafs take into consideration this summer, whether it's roster construction, like how these teams are put together, or the style of play, how these guys are playing. So what are a couple of things that when you're watching, not just Dallas, but Dallas, Edmonton, Florida, and New York, like what are some things that you're noticing that you think the Leafs don't do well and need to incorporate going forward to have that playoff success?
Well, I think 2 for me, the Leafs were playing too much around the perimeter. They've always kind of been like that in the playoffs, but it's very apparent. And because they don't have that point shot, that they're not able to generate that offense from that area where like you look at Dallas, you look at even the Rangers, like look at the goals that some of the goals they're scoring, right? Like it's coming from a point shot.
The Bouchard Boosh bomb, bud.
Yeah, the Boosh bomb even, right? Like the Leafs, that's something that it's a simple thing. It looks like a simple thing, but when you have it, it's so effective, and when you don't have it, it's apparent. And Leafs did not have it. Like last year, the reason why they beat Tampa, they had a little bit of that. They had, Morgan Rielly was finding ways to get shots in on net, either for the deflection or just getting them in. They didn't have that, and I think that takes a lot of pressure, and it forces teams to play up higher in the zone. You saw Boston was just collapsing, and that left little to no room for the Leafs forwards to do much. But at the same time, I'm watching these guys. They're fighting for that ice, right? Like Lafreniere, why I love him so much is he doesn't care. He's going right for that net. He's attacking, right? He's finding ways to make open up space for him. And you know what? The ugly goals too. Like you look at the Dallas game too. Like they're not all pretty goals, but they are just in the right areas and they're fighting for every second chance opportunity. Like too many times the Leafs are either one and done, not cycling the puck enough. They're not wearing down the opponent's defense. So there's like little things, but those little things add up in the playoffs. And I think that's like details that the Leafs are just not getting right and just elevating your play, right? You have to take your play to another level. You have to really want it. You have to earn it as well.
100%. So like, yes, there's a mentality difference between the way that the Maple Leafs play and the way that these guys play, and hopefully Craig Berube can instill that that attacking killer instinct type of mentality into this group. We know it's been lacking for quite some time, so that's the hope there with bringing in a guy like Berube over Sheldon Keefe, that type of voice that really yearns that from his group, that is going to demand it from his group. So that's one thing. And I think that they've, made necessary changes already to try and do those types of things. Though that's really good though. The point shot, I didn't have that on my list, but that's obviously a big time need that Toronto needs to figure out. I mean, we didn't even mention how much of a bonus that would be for the power play. That's been god awful. And you look at a couple of teams out here that are this deep in the playoffs. Partly it's because of their power play. Like the Rangers' power play has been outstanding, and has obviously Edmonton's power play with that Bush bomb. So you can also improve your special teams by getting a strong shot from the point. So yeah, that is one. When you're reconstructing the roster, get yourself not only some guys who can play, obviously, they need to be able to defend, but also like think about someone who could let it rip from the blue line at whether it's on the power play or even at 5-on-5, whatever, but someone who's got a cannon of a shot. I think that would open up some things for this Maple Leafs team, for sure. I think that if we continue on the roster construction conversation, I think obviously outside of the blue line or outside of the bomb of a shot, they just need to get bigger, faster, and stronger on the blue line anyway. Like you look at these teams that are still out there, you look at the Dallas Stars defense, you look at the New York Rangers defense, like these are hulking blue liners. Like you've got guys like Chris Tanev, Miro Heiskanen, Esa Lindell, Ryan Suter. Like these dudes are just all big defensemen who can all defend. You know what I mean? And they're all smart. They play in their own zone. You look on the other side, Edmonton's got a couple of guys, but the Rangers have some really good, strong, smooth skating defensemen who are also really good in their own zone. Really good sticks too. So improving that blue line overall, which we all know needs to be impacted, but also depth down the middle of the ice. That's something that I don't know if we talk enough about being a big time need for this team. But if they go into next season with Matthews, Tavares, and David Kampf as their 1, 2, 3, I don't like that. I'll be honest. I don't think that's a winning team. Once again, you look at the center depth down the ice when you look at the Dallas Stars, who arguably are the best team in hockey right now. I mean, Rupe Hintz comes back and that team's just completely transformed because they've got the depth down the middle. You've got Rupe Hintz, you've got Wyatt Johnston, and then you've got yourself, whether it's Duchesne or Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, like you pick your poison. There's a bunch of guys down the middle who you're going to have to go out and play against. Radek Faksa, who's just like a gamer, fourth line center. So I think that's another thing when you're looking at roster construction. Improve the blue line, more depth down the middle, like a real third line center, I think is what's needed for this team. And then ultimately like look at the two teams who are leading right now in their respective series. What's the one thing that they truly have in common, Dave?
Would that be goaltending?
That would be stellar goaltending.
Yeah.
And I mean, stabilizing the pipes, like that's just what needs to be done. If you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, got to stabilize the pipes. And I think it might be a mistake to just roll the dice and assume Joseph Woll is going to take the step and assume Joseph Woll is going to be healthy. I don't know if I want him to be the 1A. I'm not sure about that. I think the Leafs might need to kind of look elsewhere and maybe really solidify that goaltending position because you're probably not going to be able to improve the D, add depth, and stabilize the goalie. But if you can get the goalie in place and you can play with good structure, which we'll get to on the other side of the break here when we talk about the style of play that they can learn from. A dude in net who can make the same stops that Shesterkin's making, that Ottinger's making, that Bobrovsky has made over the course of the last 2 years. I mean, you're going to win a lot of games. They're going to win games for you and kind of, mask some of the deficiencies that you might have on your roster. So that's one other thing too. When you're talking about roster construction, I would really look at the goaltending position this summer. I don't think like Joseph Woll and Jake Allen or a Joseph Woll and a Cam Talbot, like go pick Casey DeSmith's a free agent goalie. I don't think that's what's going to work here in Toronto. I really think they need to get a bona fide goaltender to, maybe it's a 1A or a flat out number one. And Joseph Woll is the number 1B or even number 2. And they split the net like maybe a 60-40 situation. But I'm starting to look at the goaltending position as a more of a need for this team than maybe we previously thought.
My thing is, it's not play with Joseph Woll; it's his injury status, right? Like
Right,
for me,
right. That goes into it, right?
It definitely does. I think that's why Brad Shilevy made that comment, right? We need to get him right because he knows that if Joseph Woll can't be available, what's the point of having this highly touted good young goaltender if he's not there, right? And I do think that some of it's a little unlucky, right? I don't like the injury, the one that he had, the one that took him out for a long time. That was one where it was a bit of a fluky one, but at the same time, he's also been very banged up.
Game 7. Also the one that cost him Game 7. Like,
well, that one was a different. If it was a recurring injury,
fluky though, like it's so fluky is what I mean. Like
I know,
so very fluky injury.
Yeah, right. Like I equated. I equate it to Demko, right? Because like all year, you always think the Vancouver Canucks' chance is really good if Thatcher Demko's in net. He gets injured. Shilov's played very well, but he's not Patrick It's not Thatcher Demko. I almost went Patrick. Thatcher Demko. He's not Thatcher Demko, and that's something that every team is going to have. You always need the depth in goaltending, but you also need your top guy to be available. I think that's also why Florida's like, we got to have Stolarz play as many games as he did. Even the Rangers, we have to have Lundqvist. We had to have
quick
for Shesterkin. Like you have to get these guys to the playoffs. And once they're in the playoffs, you kind of expect them to take that mantle. Right.
Yeah.
Like I don't have an issue if the Leafs decide they want to go for a number one guy because they really haven't had that like they've had good goaltending. They haven't had that bona fide starter. So I have no problem if they want to do that. It's just you got to go get the right one, right? And they're not like there's obviously one candidate out there. I want to talk about UC Saros, and like that would probably be the one. All right, a whole lot of them available too. So that's the other wrinkle in that idea as well.
Yeah. Well, not only they're not available, there's just not a lot of them out there in general, right? Like
that's why you got to try to develop them, like Jake Ottinger, Shesterkin.
Yep. Skinner was developed. I mean, Bobrovsky is a different story, but the rest of those three were homegrown products, right? for those two for those three teams. But if you can't shore up all three of those positions, at least playing a certain style of hockey gives you a better chance. Let's dive into that and what maybe style of hockey we're learning from these teams can the Maple Leafs implement into their play next spring, should they get there, I suppose. So we'll get to that quickly on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. The Locked On Leafs podcast continues, and we are taking a look at the four teams remaining in the playoffs, and we're trying to decipher if or what the Maple Leafs, I guess, could learn from these teams playing, next season. What can they implement from these squads, whether it's roster construction or it's the flat out style of play that the Maple Leafs can utilize next season to try and have some success in the springtime for the first time in what seems like forever. Definitely over 20 years, that's for sure. So we kind of went over like roster construction and what we think the Maple Leafs need to improve on to be a cup contender next year in terms of how they can attack their roster. But obviously, easier said than done. But sometimes if you play the right way, you can also go on a decent run here. And that's what I'm noticing is like you look at the way that these teams typically play deep into a playoff, and it's all very similar. They all play fast, but they all play heavy. They're all big, mobile, structured in all three zones, and they attack the net. And I think that's what the Maple Leafs are going to need to learn what to do next season. You brought up the perimeter play a little bit earlier in the podcast, and that's exactly what not to do, right? Like they need to just figure out a way to put the shoulder down and take the puck to the net. You look at the couple of goals that were scored, last night for Dallas. I mean, you look at J Rob, he kind of just had a puck, took it to the net, and was going to take it in behind the goal, but just decided, actually, I'm a foot out from the net, and I see this little spot. I can bank it off the goaltender and in. And what do you know? A goal.
That's playoff hockey there for you. You need to. It's those split second decisions. You got to give your opponent no time to react. Essentially, right?
Right.
Have them have them off guard a little bit, right? Don't be predictable. And I think that's the Leafs problem too. Guys are a little too predictable in what they want to do.
Put guys on their heels, right? They're always on their toes, like the Leafs defender. They're always on their toes and ready to attack you because, they're just not moving fast enough. Realistically, they played way too stagnant and perimeter. But if you put them on their heels and you have them kind of leaning back and moving this way, that way, open things up, then that gives you room to attack the center of the ice, attack the middle of the ice, and cut to the net, get pucks in on goal, and score those dirty, greasy grinder goals like Jason Robertson did, even on the second goal that he had there when he just kind of backhand flips it into the back of the net off of a rebound 10 feet in front of the goal. So, I think that's one way to do it. But ultimately, I really think also, the cycle game. The Maple Leafs are going to have to implement a strong cycle game, get pucks in deep, and then play, heavy hockey ultimately. And that's, again, exactly what Craig Berube wants his team to do. So they've got the coach in place that wants to do these things. His system asks the Maple Leafs to do these things. Whether or not they're going to actually do them, it remains to be seen. And that's kind of what we'll learn, I guess, a little bit throughout the regular season. But as we all know, the playoffs, for whatever reason, is a completely different animal for this Maple Leafs team, and everything that they do in the regular season rarely translates. So it's almost like we technically are going to have to wait till next April to see if all of this implementation can even take place.
Yeah, I was reading a lot about the Dallas. There's a really good story in The Athletic about how kind of the Stars draft saved the franchise pretty much, because that team was in a bad spot, bad contracts for Sagan and Jamie Benn.
Oh, they got Heiskanen, J. Rob, and Ottinger all in the same draft.
Yeah, right. within like first like those like just ridiculous like franchise altering draft.
And I'm pretty sure Wyatt Johnston and Stankoven were in the same draft too, were they not?
2021.
I believe like Johnston was the first round pick and Stankoven I think was a second round pick. I may not be 100% on that, but I believe that was that may have been part of
quickly look.
it
Yeah,
there.
he was. Yeah, 23rd overall for Johnson, 47th overall for Stankoven. Again, just
Thomas Harley would have been in one of those. Maybe he was in the
2019.
Heiskanen draft as well. Okay,
He was
2019.
he was a couple
good
years
window.
after.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Ty Dellandrea was 13th overall in 2018. Like they just hit. Like that's where it kind of starts. But then I was reading further down to the piece, and Wyatt Johnston also credited Pete DeBoer's system, and he said the simplicity of the system helps. Because, and I'll read the quote. The biggest thing is it lets us use our strength and play offensively. We're not required to dump the puck in every time we have they pass the red line. We're able to play our game and make plays. Like playoff hockey, there's a lot of simplicity. There's some nice plays too. Like the Rangers had some beautiful plays, like that shorthand goal by Goodrow, unbelievable. But it's playing simple, but it's playing, as you said, fast with pace. I'm watching that Rangers game the other day, and I'm just like, man, like if the Leafs would just play with that urgency, that pace, like they got the horses to do it. That's the thing. Like this isn't like, oh, if only the Leafs can do it. They got to get the guys doing it, and I think that's what I think Craig Berube is going to have to try to do right from the start. It can't be something that he tries to get the team to do later in the year. It has to start right from the beginning. I think that's where having him in and being able to establish right off the hop will hopefully benefit these guys, right? Get them maybe even training the right way so that they're ready for this. Like I think it all kind of I'm hoping that this team watches what these other teams are doing and say, yeah, like okay, this is what we need to start doing, and hopefully that's put in their brains right from when they show up to camp, because it has to.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and hopefully that is the case. But again, often we see things in camp and through the regular season, and then it just doesn't translate, and I can't really explain why. So as much as we'll be excited, and I guarantee I'm going to come on the pod and I'll be hoodwinked again and say, "See, Berube's got them playing right. This is what they've always been needing to do. Look at Marner going into the corner. Look at Marner, taking pucks to the net, finding ice for himself. You can see them moving around in the power play, and then odds are mid-April comes around and they'll revert back to themselves because that's what always happens. Like I had those same thoughts every year under Sheldon Keefe too. And then the playoffs would roll around and, well, we don't need to go over that history lesson anymore because, well, history repeats itself over and over and over again. But we'll see. Maybe Berube can and will make a difference. But again, going to have to wait till next April to even find out if that is the case. I know. So upsetting. All right. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for y'all tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.